Good morning. My name is Lucy Payne. I'm a member of the Always Possible team, and I'm your host for this morning. And I think this is a great start to a Friday. So the topic of today, aging well in a digital world, older people can help. In a growing technological world where innovation in the way we do things and the products we use are moving at such a significant rate, there's a perception that the older members of our society are being left behind. But perhaps this has more to do with how our society imagines older people to be, rather than being based on what's happening on the ground. Working with older people, their families, technology companies, community care services, housing associations, care homes and local authorities, a multidisciplinary team of Sussex researchers tell a different tale. During this session, we're going to highlight examples of how older people and their carers aren't the digital Luddites we think they are. Rather, they are savvy innovators who know what they want and need from technology they use, and how they're playing a pivotal role in development and design of digital solutions. Let's also acknowledge and discuss the challenges of older people encounter in technology co-design, with the aim to unpick how the digital divide plays out in technology co-design. A story sent to me this week which really made me smile was it showed that you're never too old to be curious or make a change and use technology to do that. A wonderful lady who bought her first laptop at 58, and at 81 decided that she learned code. There were no games she felt aimed at her generation. Getting older doesn't just mean you stop wanting to learn, stop wanting to change the world, or just improve your life. And technology can be a key element to these changes. And my mother, for example, has become an absolute demon on the internet, but she lost the use of her legs. And she suddenly realized that was a way for her to reach the world. So it's empowering, but also finding drivers. That lady in Japan just saw there were no games. She had a game in mind. She asked younger developers to create it. They didn't understand, so she did it herself. So doesn't mean, you can't categorize a whole generation, and we shouldn't do that. So let's see if we can inspire and support and generate those conversations. But enough of my preamble. Well, thank you for joining us. And I'd like to introduce our panel. What we're going to do is hear from our panel. We have a lovely group. We have 5 minutes from each panel member, and then we'll get into the Q&A, into the discussion. And I think that's where the really exciting stuff happens. So let's start off with Dr. Lisa Chen. So Lisa, thank you for joining us. Lisa's a social worker. I can't pronounce this next word, gerontologist, lecturer, and the Deputy Director, Centre of Social Work for Innovation and Research, University of Sussex. So Lisa, you can have to forgive my pronunciation there.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'm delighted to share some of the research findings from 2 projects that I'm currently involved. One focuses on aging care in care homes called Connected Care, and it is funded by ESRC IAA to understand, firstly, what are the challenges that care homes face, specifically in relation to the delivery of care to people living with dementia. Secondly, how can digital technologies such as sensors, artificial intelligence, and the 5Gs be developed and used to improve the work of care home staff and the delivery of dementia care. The other one focused on 76 older people who live alone in their own homes during pandemic. The project is called Stay Together, Recover Together, and it is founded by Emily, who is the next speaker, the CEO of our local charity, Time to Talk Befriending. Part of the research was to understand older people's current use of technology and their experiences, needs, wants, and desire. There are emerging themes across those 2 projects. It includes connectivity, user-friendliness, and inclusion. Connectivity. The care home staff help us to learn that, firstly, they want the technology which can help with detecting, monitoring, and or predicting critical events such as falls without human interaction. And they want the technology which can help with undertaking and automating administrative type of work, such as typing notes. Both demands are to free up time for care home staff to share for residents and to spend quality time with residents. And it is worth noting that the demographic of care home staff are aging. In the UK as a whole, they are 27%, which is 400 and 10,000 of adult social care workforce were age 55 and above. There is a continuing rising age of this workforce, and the care home residents and the family help us to learn that they want a single platform of communication between residents and their families to sustain their family relationship. The older people in the community help us to learn that more than half, which is 36 out of the 76, those have technologies like smartphone, iPad, and a laptop. Within those, many are in their age of 80s, and the 5 were in their age of 90s. And they want the technology for practical help that enable them to access online shopping and the internet banking while they are shopping or housebound. Equally, the older people in the community express their desire to contact friends and the families through the use of technology, and this may ease some of the emotional effects of pandemic and or isolation by adding with loneliness. So above all, clearly, to have a technology that could support quality time spending with family and a friend, and to receive relationship-based in-person care are very important to older people who live in care home and for older people who live in the community. The theme about user-friendliness, the care home residents and the family help us to learn that they want the technology to be user-friendly, adjusted to the various needs, skills, and the cognitive ability of people with dementia, whilst also offering opportunities to stimulate residents' cognitive capacities. And they want the technology to be affordable. Similarly, the older people in the community help us to learn that few of them did not have IT equipment due to financial deprivation or not knowing how to buy one and feel needed assistance with internet setup and access. Nevertheless, nearly half of those old people would like to explore the option of using simple and safe technology and the internet. 15 of those already own some sort of a technology equipment, including laptop, tablet, and a smartphone, but lack the accessibility and the educational information to use them. One of the people in her age of 88 said, I bought a book to learn how to use laptop. It is aimed at senior citizens, but I still cannot make sense of it. So as a result, there were few of those old people in the community said they have bought a laptop, tablet, or smartphone that it stays in the box and never been used. Inclusion. The older people in the community help us to learn that in order for them to fully access the information and then make proper use of the technology, they want various learning approach to be available. For example, in person, via post, group, and individual sessions. Both of the people in the care homes and in the community also help us to learn that it is very important to have a balance between digital and the in-person human engagement. The meaningful human relationship like a touch and like a hug are not replaceable by any technologies. So I'm truly grateful to learn from the older people who participate in the Connected Care and the Stay Together and the Recovered project. In order to take the learning forward, an experience-based co-design approach is needed. The approach is a collegial approach with older people and organizations working together to define and design pathways and services to engage with end users and the stakeholders. And I feel privileged to work with scientists and the social scientist colleagues from engineering, business, like Debbie, who is going to chair the discussion session later, medical schools, and the science policy research unit, like Raleigh, who is our speaker in this session too, in the connected care team and healthy aging group at the University of Sussex. In February, while there were rising concern around COVID-19 development, we had 26 participants from care homes, family representative, health and social care authorities, and the technology providers, including Pao from KingSet, who is also one of the presenters today. They were actively participate in the Connected Cares Project First stakeholder workshop and share their thoughts, idea, and enthusiasm on experience-based co-design collaborations. However, we are still a long way to go to take our learning forward from the older people. We need more older people and the stakeholders' commitment to work with us to take our learning from old people forward and to promote healthy aging in the digital age. I'm going to post my email contact in the chat box. And if you are interested to hear more about the studies and or interested to join us, I will be very happy to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. What a great start. I agree with you. Nothing replaces human touch, isn't it? There's a lot that technology can do, but we still have human instincts, don't we? Moving on, Emily Kenwood, the CEO of Time to Befriending, who we've just had a little bit of a background on. But Emily, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm really pleased to be invited to speak today, and I think I'm maybe slightly devil's advocate, but as Lisa's already mentioned, the important feedback from a sample of our members following a recent survey has been great. It's been great evidence and great stuff that we can learn from. Actually, I was surprised to learn how many people actually had a device already, which certainly challenges the perception of older people not being interested in using IT. But what I wasn't surprised to learn is that the majority needed additional support to learn how to use the equipment. So whilst the survey feedback is based on responses from 76 of our scheme members, as a charity, we actually support over 500 people who are majority aged 80 plus and living with long-term health conditions. From the offset, we've kept the voice of older people at the heart of our work. And as a result, we're aware that actually, despite a small increase in the interest in the use of technology, there are actually still a large cohort of people who choose not to be online. And I think this is the point that I really wanted to make today, that whilst technology is amazing for those who wish to embrace it and who can understand how to use it, and I'm sure we'll hear some great stories today about how technology is helping to reduce isolation and keep people connected, there are still hundreds of older people who give various reasons for remaining offline. For example, uncertainty about safety using the internet, which is an unknown entity, putting their personal information online, which makes them feel vulnerable and at risk of scam fraud, a lack of knowledge and understanding about how to use technology. And for those who don't have any family or friends remaining, which is the majority of our scheme members, they don't have anyone to call when things go wrong, or they have updates to navigate, or when challenges arise. Other considerations also need to be given to whether people have access to the internet and if they can actually afford access. Also, whether swipe technology is really the best solution, bearing in mind dexterity and the lack of moisture in our fingers as we begin to grow older. Of course, training, advice, support and resources can be provided to try and minimise feelings of risk and uncertainty and encourage people to explore technology, but people still have the right to choose. If they want to continue to remain offline, then I think we need to ensure that they do have the option to do so. But in this current day and age, especially since the pandemic, where technology has accelerated and become even more important for service delivery and activities, this isn't always easy. There isn't enough time today to share in-depth case studies to highlight the challenges people face living in the digital world. But I think there's definitely a question we need to raise here about the imbalance of power experienced by these people who are not conforming to the way the digital world is evolving. Those in their senior years have already lived through a digital revolution of sorts, which has further advanced since the pandemic. There are many people out there, not just older people, who struggle with technology or who simply choose to remain offline. And whilst they might be in the minority, their views are still important and valid, which is why I was really pleased to be able to give them a small voice today, especially because we've heard firsthand from our members how not being online has left people feeling powerless, unheard, invisible and forgotten, which actually adds to further feelings of loneliness and anxiety and social isolation that they're experiencing in our society. So when considering what the future of ageing well in the digital world looks like, the takeaway I hope to leave with you today is the fact that because these people are hidden and almost forgotten, it doesn't mean that they're not there. So if technology really is to become fully inclusive, it not only needs to be financially accessible and user-friendly, but older people need to definitely input in the design. Training and support needs to be readily available through a range of paper resources, telephone and face-to-face conversations, and online communication methods, as Lisa's already mentioned. Also, there's group and one-to-one sessions as well. And there also need to be alternative solutions to IT, especially as the banking and utility bills and everything's shifting to being online. They need to have access to these things in other ways because one size doesn't fit all. People really do have a right to choose to use technology or not, and it feels wrong to force people to conform, especially when doing so can leave people feeling upset, frustrated, helpless, and left behind, which is something we've heard people say often. So whilst my contribution might not seem overly positive today, it's not meant to diminish the incredible opportunities that IT can provide for social inclusion and for more cost-effective and productive service provision. We couldn't have functioned without it, so I'm a big advocate of IT myself, but I did think it was important to speak up for the people who feel that they don't have a voice, in the hope that these considerations can be made as we all continue to plough on using technology in our daily lives, and as technology continues to advance, grow and evolve. So thank you for listening today. And again, I'll put my email in the chat, and if anyone ever wants to contact me about any of our research or talk to me further, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And I totally agree. I think Brighton Library used to run some wonderful courses to help people get online, but then you go to buy a laptop. It's confusing enough for anybody buying a laptop, isn't it? And you walk into, PC World, other retailers are available, and you don't know what you want. You don't know what you need. You almost need the basic Nokia version, don't you? Because people look at a smartphone versus a Nokia. And as you say, there's that ignorance. I mean, I'm tech support for my mum. My other half's parents are terrified. They use their laptop so they can check emails about where the canal boat updates are, and that's it. His mum is terrified if she puts her credit card next to her laptop, somebody might, but it's fear mongering. There's a certain amount, the press that a lot of people of an older generation read make technology look absolutely terrifying, like it's Terminator. And they are playing on that, it being a dark art and about it being really difficult to understand. And so people are put off actually what could be a great way of keeping in touch with grandchildren. As you say, banking, it's such an empowering platform if you understand it. So but you're right. I think things like Alexa, I think voice driven, there's so many, but even that you read scaremongering about, they're always listening. And it's just it's all that balance around security and using it consciously, but using it and finding the technology that works for you, as we all do, as we're not digital natives. I'm a little too old to be a native. I haven't been on an iPad from the adopt, but it's empowering them. And things like iPads are great, aren't they? Because it's just that playing and touching over a screen. I think arthritis is another thing to take into consideration, isn't it? The little keyboards aren't great for everybody, but yeah, it's great. Thank you, Emily. That was absolutely wonderful. Caroline Ridley, CEO of Impact Initiatives, a charity that supports older people in the community. Good morning, Caroline. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning. So yes, I'm Caroline Ridley. I'm CEO at Impact Initiatives. We work across Sussex and we actually work with all ages, but obviously I'm here connected to our older people's work. One of the key things we do is lead the Ageing Well programme across Brighton and Hove. I think firstly I want to just recognise that older people are a very wide range, and there's probably 2, maybe 3 generations within that term, older people. And I think we need to recognise that there's many of those older people who already embrace and have led or lead on technology, but they're not the people that I'm really talking about today. So the question I was posed is, how do we make sure that technological innovations aimed at older people genuinely take into account their needs and wants? So I think it's probably useful to start with some facts and ask ourselves a couple of questions. So in 2011, 52% of people aged 64 to 75 used the internet, but by 2019, this had increased to 83%. Also in 2019, there were 4 million people in the UK who'd still never used the World Wide Web, and 3.7 million of these are in the age 55 plus age group. So there's 51% of people aged 75 and over tell us they don't use IT at all. What I think we have to remember is that means 49% do, and that's a considerable number. I think it's helpful to look at 2 points. Excuse me. What technology are older people using, and what would they use if they knew it existed or could see the benefits? The older people that we're working with use a mixture of tablets, iPad, laptop and desktop computers, and around 100 use these to engage in our weekly online activity programme. Most have had their equipment for some time, and so they're definitely in the group who have an interest and see the benefits of using technology. However, in addition to that, there's many more have a smartphone, use call systems, cash points, voicemail, tap cards in shops, and have digital TV, and likely a long list of other technology, which has become second nature to use, but is not generally thought of as IT. COVID's made a massive difference in older people wanting to use technology, and the main reason for this being to keep in contact with family and friends. So to come back to the original question, I think we need to understand why we want or need people to use technology, and ask the question, why would they want to? We know that 77% of older people have low IT skills, and we've learned increasingly recently that teaching these to people who have no previous experience takes time. It's not intuitive as it is to younger generations who've used it since their early years. And to engage people further, we need to be able to show why the use of this technology would be of benefit to them. We know that through COVID, many more have got online and now use tablets in particular, as they wanted to get in touch with friends and family, and this wasn't seen as needed before. But for many, it became the only way to do this, and so became essential. We also know that introducing and learning how to use new equipment has been most successful when taught by a known and trusted person, although this is not necessarily a family member, as many have discovered. Alternatively, someone recommended from a trusted source has worked well. Confidence is a really big issue, and so teaching and guiding with the right approach at the right pace is essential, as is leaving the door open to go back over things as and when needed. Older people are great ambassadors. Many who now engage with our online programme of activities are there because someone in their own age often recommended it, and that's often somebody they already knew. As Emily said, some people never want to use new technology, and we have to respect that and ask who it is that thinks they should or will benefit if they do. However, there's numerous older people who've worked in IT, use technology on a daily basis, understand and embrace it, alongside many more who with the right support will get on board. Affordability or perceived affordability is a barrier. For example, a significant number of older people have stayed with the same phone provider for many years. If you're not online, Go Compare and Money Supermarket are of little use. However, it's possible that with a new provider or tariff, people could have Wi-Fi at no extra cost. We need to raise awareness of this and provide the support needed to help people make the move. There is a call for older people to have free Wi-Fi. Imagine the multiple benefits this would bring to them, but also to professionals, particularly health and social care staff. It would hugely increase the ability to check in with people remotely and manage all manner of medical equipment from afar. So in summary, if we're developing technology aimed at older people, we need to talk to them, and we need to do this through existing groups where there's trusted people who can encourage participation and where they'll be with their peers. People need to be comfortable in order to speak on a subject they have little confidence with. We need to capture something that can be seen as a benefit and not something being forced upon people. As previously said, the Skype, Zoom, etc. have recently been a great example of this working. We need to accept it's not for all and focus and take the right approach with those who are interested, and with a little of the right encouragement, will embrace the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I think, as you say, it's really important that it's all about, it's an individual decision. So my mum became internet shopping because she lost use of her legs. Suddenly it became a freedom for her. It meant that she was empowered, and she couldn't imagine what it would have been like prior to the internet being in that situation. A question from Lucy Jenks around those statistics. Where were those from, the age and IT use data?
They're mainly from the Centre for Ageing Better.
And I also liked a comment from Suzanne Noble that I suspect that as someone with an 83-year-old father who's more tech savvy than many people in their 20s, that education has much to do with it. I know younger people are also complete Luddites with technology. And that goes back to the let's not blanket sort of propose how a generation is. As you say, some people are absolutely probably better than we are with technology. It's just those ones who are intrigued but maybe daunted, I think, that we need to empower, don't we?
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful.
And I think we have to remember it's some of those people in their 80s who were leading on this, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago.
Absolutely. And again, that goes back to the point of, I mean, everyone gets very upset about being blocked into a generation. As you say, there are three within this conversation, and all of us are heading towards it. And, you know, it's how we all support each other, because tech could do so much for good, couldn't it? Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Dr. Lisa Chen. I do apologise, my pronunciation is terrible. So but welcome to join us. I think we're going to share your screen, aren't we?
Great, thank you very much.
Good morning.
Good morning. If you hear strange noises, this is my dog, Oscar, who of course picked this point to have his man moment for the day.
I think we're getting quite used to that though, aren't we, in this digital world, that we spent the last six months getting to know people's houses.
Yes. So today, thank you very much for the invite. And today I want to talk about the learnings from an evaluation of a pilot project which I did for Orbit, one of the largest housing associations in the UK. So in 2018 and 2019, they ran a pilot project which was funded by the Good Things Foundation and the NHS, in which in a similar way to a lot of the comments that are left in the chat right now, they gave out smart tablets to a lot of the residents in some of their shelter scheme accommodation. The interesting thing about the project was that then they enabled a lot of the older people living in the sheltered scheme to organize themselves and to carry out peer-led training. So a lot of the elder people who are interested in getting involved become digital champions who received support and training, and in turn started to train some of their peers in how to use the tablets and how to do things. So I have to say that this was one of my most pleasant research projects that I have ever done. In SPRU, at the Science Policy Research Unit, I work almost exclusively on infrastructure and tend to engage a lot more with policymakers. And I have to say that it was really delightful to have a completely different group of people to get to know. Today, I want to talk about 3 things that I think are quite important for us to take forward in doing, hopefully, a lot of innovative new projects around digital participation and inclusion for elderly people. Before I move on, I also want to mention that at the time, on the evaluation project, I work with one of the MSc student, Asli Atesh, who is now a PhD student and who also decided to do her master dissertation looking at grassroots innovation by elderly people in digital inclusion. So there are 3 things that I want to talk about. The first one is how important actually is the work of translation, of building support infrastructure and intermediation. And by that, I mean, elderly people did not interact in a straightforward way with the built environment, with the material infrastructure. By that, I mean the tablets, the way in which they can access the internet. And this is one bit that really needs a lot of support. I'll give you an example. For example, a lot of the elderly people said that they really wanted to have a digital directory. So this is, in a way, a form of intermediation between having something which is paper-based in front of them and going completely online. A digital directory, in their minds, was something that would tell them about the things they can look forward to. Because something which might be straightforward for a lot of us, such as if you're wondering whether something wonderful exists, for example, a combination between a muffin and a donut, the first thing most of us would do is going to Google it. We're going to Google a combination of muffin and a donut. But that step is not necessarily obvious for the people that we worked with. So they want a digital directory that gives them an idea about what kind of sources and websites they can access, gives them an idea about which ones of them are safe. And I think digital directories provide one of these important support infrastructures that are needed, not only for the user, for the role of the digital champions as well. So one thing that we learned from evaluating the Barnet Way Pathfinder pilot, which Orbit ran, was that it was not enough to provide training once to the digital champions and to give people access to smart tablets. There had to be a constant support. The interesting thing there is that the constant support would mean things from reassuring people to covering over things that they have already been shown how to do, they've already learned, because the retention was not something that will happen just after one interaction. So that kind of support means that apart from things like a digital directory, which is a key reference point, meant that there was a strong preference among the participants for a peer-led approach. That is, we had a very negative reaction to training which was carried out by much younger people. So a lot of the participants saw that the training that was provided from their peers was more valuable. For example, many of them spoke about the fact that they didn't feel that they were rushed. They didn't feel that they were judged because they kept forgetting how to do things. So another thing which we found extremely interesting, and I think it's something that we don't see very often in any kind of research and initiatives, is that the way in which people over the age of 65 interacted with learning about the digital world and interacting with their smart tablets was very gendered. So there were big differences between the kind of activities that men and women did, the level of confidence that they had in carrying out certain activities. And also there was a very gendered, installation of an update. And there was a very gendered approach to what they perceived was possible for them to do and how they organized themselves, not only to support each other, but also to how they learned. And one of the things that we should include in thinking through, how do we build that translation that helps people who are more tech savvy out of their age group, let's call them the digital champions. And the other people they have to kind of train and support is that we really need to consider things that might act as hidden barriers. And one of the things we found is that GDPR rules are one of these things. So understanding what GDPR rules are and how GDPR rules, for example, were applied in some of the shelter schemes where the pilot was going on was a real barrier to how people can get together and support each other. And I'll give you a simple example. In housing associations, shelter schemes for a lot of people over the age of 55, if you want to go and help someone in their own apartment to access something, you can't just go and knock on the door, that you need to kind of get permission in order to access. If someone hasn't turned up for their training session, you can't just go and ask where they are and what's happening with them, because then the site managers wouldn't necessarily give you that information because it's considered to be against GDPR rules. And I think these kind of things are extremely important, because the understanding of GDPR rules that the housing association had and the understanding of GDPR rules that participants had was very different. But the way we see it is that it was almost impossible to create that kind of translation, to create the supportive environment and to intermediate without acknowledging it and finding a way in which to make GDPR rules work for this kind of initiatives and for peer-led approach. So I want to leave it here, but I hope that we can actually, I have to say, I find very interesting the chat which is going on right now and all the people talking about this incredible project. One of the things I wanted to say before I end my 5 minutes is that I see personally that there is great opportunity to expand what we consider to be initiatives for digital inclusion, to include other things which are strongly interrelated. One example is exclusion and inclusion in the low carbon transition. So having these kind of, building these supporting networks that help us translate things and they help intermediate for digital inclusion can be a great gateway for greater energy inclusion, for greater understanding about how to make decisions about low carbon transition, behavioral change, and so on. So I think these kind of learnings are really important. And I think that we should definitely work together to expand them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you've, as you say, we've got some great chat going on. There's some very mixed feelings about the idea of directories, good and bad experiences on that. One question from Anna Stratford, though, about the different approaches due to gender. Were there any sort of key points you'd like to expand on that one?
Yeah, so for example, one of the objectives of the pilot project was to get a high number of people to switch from using the kind of co-in service to co-in repairs and to book appointments with health professionals. So the idea was that a lot of people would have switched to doing this online. And we found that there was a great breakdown of what type of activities were performed by men and by women. So we found that almost all people who switched to online banking and to using online systems to book medical appointments were male. And we found that it was women who actually engaged with most of the different types of activities. And so they would engage with all sorts of activities a lot more. Men would just go and do one thing. And also we saw that about 82% of all the digital champions and participants in the peer training were all women.
It's fascinating.
And that, of course, then had a huge impact on how training was organized, how it was approached, and how it actually took place.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. I went to the wrong speaker there last one. So Pal, I do apologise for going off piece then. That was my fault. Can I please welcome Dr. Pal Bazante is the Chief Executive of Kenwood, a company that brings digital transformation to organisations, helping them make the most of their technology. Welcome. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for the invite, and it's a pleasure being here. It's been so fascinating and interesting listening to all the speakers. You know, I've kind of been jotting down some of the words: single platform to engage with family members and the residents, isolation, quality time, relationship, user-friendly, human engagement, behavior, security. And it's quite interesting, when Raya was presenting her presentation, she got a pop-up to say, a new software is available. So there's so much kind of going on, but also in terms of the social responsibility aspect, you know, that there is absolutely, in terms of Kenwood, let me introduce Kenwood. Kin is next of kin, relationship between people, data, technology, ecosystem. See this, how do you see that relationship to grow that ecosystem? Our purpose in life is really connecting the disconnected. And the reason for setting up Kenwood was that we kind of saw challenges in two aspects of the areas. One of the challenges that we work with is pediatric intensive care teams, because from a technology point of view, they were way behind, because most of the focus in the healthcare system is very much in the sort of the big population group. And then now is very much in terms of, we've seen over the few months how deprived the older generation are from how do we engage with them in terms of technology. So really my next 5 minutes, it's looking at both aspects. You know, it has to be inclusive. I totally agree with all the presenters, but it's about inclusive that is relevant. You know, there is a myth that older people don't like technology. I totally disagree with that. And I will give you a good example here. Here's my mother. She's 83. She doesn't read, she doesn't write, but she made a point of learning how to use a mobile device, because during the COVID process, she has not been able to see her children, interact with her grandchildren. And for her, that's been a big gap in her life. And she made a point of learning how to use the technology. So I think in terms of, in reality, older people are very much for using technology, provided that technology is relevant, is easy to use, and it helps them fulfill a purpose in life. And then on the other side of the coin is very much about focusing on the care providers. Now, that's the work that we've been working with Lisa in terms of how do we make care home more connected. And it's not just about making care home connected, it's about how do we provide the right solutions to the care providers so that the carer can give more time to the resident that they're serving. I mean, we spend, you know, a huge amount of money on people over 65, yet the quality of care that we provide in care homes is still very substandard. So it's really getting that balance right, in terms of one side is about giving the right technology to the older people so that they can fulfill their purpose in life. But the other one is about how do we provide the right technology to the care providers that is powerful, simple to use, again, simple to use, so that, you know, whatever they need to do, they can then focus on the residents and the people that they serve. And that's where we come in terms of Kenwood. Our focus really is in terms of how do we make the care more connected, more joined up. So we've created a platform called Swift Care. And Swift Care really enables the care providers to be able to collect the data in a much more joined up way, so that they can see the status of the resident at a glance, and then also share that data with the right upstream and downstream carer, you know, whether it's a GP or whether it's a a clinician in a hospital, if that resident needs to travel, it's that joined up care journey for that resident. And more importantly, it's easy to use. So the platform that we've designed to date has been very much focusing on the user in mind. So we've engaged with the clinical teams to say, okay, what is the clinical pathway? What is the user journey? And I think that's really important in terms of the designs of technology. So the pressure is on the technology company to design right product for people, for the older people, so that it's consulting them so that that product is relevant and it fulfills their user journey. And that's exactly what we've done with the clinical teams in terms of looking at what's the user journey, because change for them is big, because they're having to entertain huge amount of other complexity in terms of, you know, the different complexity that exist in terms of care for the older people. So it's understanding that user flow, user journey, the design aspect of any solution that is being designed by the technology team has to be fit for purpose, sustainable, but easy to use. And I think that's where the disconnect currently is. And it's something that needs to be fundamentally addressed by big techs who are releasing all of these products and services into the ecosystem. And that's about the social responsibility. And I think, you know, there is a huge amount of work that needs to be done here. And really my final slide is, as I've kind of already touched upon, in terms of how do we provide and make the solution where the information is presented in a simple way, make it mobile, because, you know, we're living in a mobile world, and providing them tablets or whatever devices that individual is comfortable in using, give them that device that has got perhaps a basic capability for a group set, a small set of people, a slightly sophisticated. It's all targeted for different needs and capability. And the other one is about the data in terms of, there is nothing worse than, you know, and I've been to support my mother in different part of her care journey. And when we go to the GP, they've got different set of data. They have to repeat constantly in terms of her status of her, you know, physiological or whatever information that we've got to discuss in terms of her care. So it's that integrated data so that that individual doesn't have to repeat all the time that, you know, what's wrong with them. But also the carer personally knows in terms of the status of that patient. But flexibility, you know, we've designed our platform that it's modular. It lets the care provider build the different clinical pathways that they're trying to fulfill. And as Lisa mentioned earlier on, we're working with them very closely to really focus on, you know, what is not necessarily a perfect care home environment would look like, because things evolve, you know, life changes and we have to change with that. But how do we make a care home that fulfills the needs of the residents, but also the needs of the care providers, so that, as Lisa said, you know, the human touch element, you know, and I'm not a Spice Girl fan, but, you know, generally they say, stop right there, thank you very much. You know, I need a human touch. People do need that human touch, because at the end of the day, it's the human interaction that makes a huge amount of impact. Technology is just an enabler. So thank you.
Oh, you've given us an earworm for the day now, haven't you? We're going to have the Spice Girls in our head all day. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Professor Debbie Keeling, Associate Dean of Engagement and Professor at Marketing at University of Sussex. We have got lots. I'm going to come back to some of the comments in the chat. I'm aware that we've run over time, which I knew we would, because this is such a great topic. But Debbie, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Lucy. My point today, I've been asked to reflect on technology and its design. And there's so much development, implementation we've been hearing about today. And in reflecting on a lot of what's been going on in the chat, we really need to shift the focus to what people need, how people engage with or don't engage with technology, and that technology is a tool, it's a method, it's something that we can use to help us achieve something. And sometimes what we're trying to achieve kind of gets lost in the process. And I saw somebody talk about ease of use in the chat. And I quite often say the ease of use really should be need of use. Why do we, what do we actually need the technology for? So I'm going to talk today about 3 points that have really been reinforced over the years that I've been working with people, particularly with chronic conditions, and what they've said about technology and the way that they engage with it or don't engage with it. And I'm going to start with the good news story. So online communities used to be seen as, about health, used to be seen as poor sources of information, poor sources of support. They had very bad kind of press. I'm very pleased to see that actually that's changing. And I've collaborated and worked with a number of people who run peer-to-peer online communities for years to help people deal with chronic conditions. And the wonderful thing about those is that they offer spaces for people to be supported, to ask questions, to discuss about their health. So this is a way that the technology is supporting this peer-to-peer learning, peer-to-peer support. And another development of that I'm really pleased to see is also that practitioners, healthcare professionals, are starting to get involved in these peer-to-peer communities and are actually expressing how much they're learning from the discussions that are going on, the kind of support that people are giving each other. And I think this really, the good news about this is really recognizing the people are experts in themselves. They're experts in their experiences, and they're experts in what they need and what support they need. And they're also experts in giving support. I'll move on from that good news story to then the bad news story. And I think this is something we've really seen in the chat and in the talks today, is that there's often a technology push towards something without a patient pull, or without, somebody who has a condition don't necessarily want that technology. And we need to recognize that technology is just one solution that we could use to one problem, of a number of solutions that we could use to one problem. There's been a real explosive growth in digital healthcare and aging support, as we've heard today. But there's also a contingent of people who are they're not just not engaging, they're making a conscious decision not to engage with those technological or digital solutions. They have very good reasons to do so, but it can also lead to exclusion because there's been an assumption made that that technological solution is the right one and therefore everybody should engage with it. And the kind of reasons that the people I've worked with have given for not engaging with online health services have been many and varied, and actually echo quite a lot, particularly of what Emily was saying earlier as well. And firstly, that it's just incompatible with what they want, what they need. They're actually very happy to talk to their GP, for example. I saw in the chat about the various different ways in which GP consultations have changed recently, that an online offering does not offer what people want. So why should they engage with an online consultation, for example? Another one that we've heard about today was vulnerability, and certainly in terms of privacy concerns, but also about emotional distress and a kind of fear that engaging with technology may not enable people to deal with their any kind of emotional stress related to that. We've also heard today about the importance of sharing, and in terms of online health services, there's some people are reliant on others to help them access those, and if they lose that support, they no longer can access that service. That's one way, and so they're dependent on what they themselves call as tech-savvy others. But at the same time, other people have seen it as a very useful way of sharing about their experiences, etc. And there's also been quite a lot of skepticism expressed. For example, is the level of service they're going to receive consistent if they use digital interface as opposed to a person interface? And we've also heard about lack of trust, but also powerlessness. And the third point I want to make is about bringing about value from whatever digital solution we use. So I'm thinking about the move towards using decision support systems to help people prepare for consultations. So having an online service where you can consider what's going to happen in consultations, what your journey might look like. These should be actually very good online services in order to help people to understand what's going to come up. So especially this is happening when you're in cancer treatments, if you're facing all sorts of cancer diagnosis, what might you expect, what treatments might you expect over what long term, what are the potential side effects, etc. But the potential for that particular service to create value for people is only as good as then the rest of the journey. So if we set up expectations that people are then going to be able to engage in consultations, engage in decision making, then that needs to be delivered in the practice itself. So sometimes we set up an online service, it sets up expectations, and then in practice over the rest of the journey, they're not delivered on. And when we do that, we actually destroy the potential value. And in one of our most recent workings with people, when we were looking at consultations over the long term, when those expectations were then not met over the long term, people were very dissatisfied. They may have received the treatment that helped them to get better, but they were frustrated. They felt very disengaged with their health service. They were they felt quite angry in some ways that they hadn't been able to then have this kind of input that expectation is set up. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie. Thank you very much. So that's all our speakers. I mean, one thing that's come across in quite a few of you is tech resentment, people being forced, as you say, banks closing, GPs forcing you to go online. And I wanted to come back to maybe, Emily, if we start with you, I think Emily and Karen, I'd love your thoughts on how we address tech resentment, because we don't want to force people to do things. We want to show people that technology could empower them to do things differently. But this enforcement is creating a block that maybe to be angry about the fact you suddenly have to bank online or you can't go and see your GP might mean you sort of blanket think, right, tech isn't for me. Emily, what's your thoughts?
I think there's definitely something around the messaging. So somebody already mentioned about the fact that scam fraud frightens people to go online. And certainly over the years, we've been warning people about scam fraud, and they get a lot of calls to their telephones every day of people trying to scam them. But I think people do try to still use the old school methods. And even with British Gas the other day, with one of our 91-year-old members, it took me 2 hours to get through the automated system, because it kept saying, can you go online? Can you go online? She does use an iPad to be able to search things, but she doesn't want to put her information online, even though we've tried to give her all the information and to help her and support that and tell her about the risks versus the positives. And actually, by the end of the call, she was so distressed because we finally got to speak to someone 2 hours later, and then they'd made assumptions about her because she was so distressed on the speakerphone that she wasn't able to cope and didn't understand what was happening and just had lost her marbles, when actually she was just very, very frustrated and upset by the system. And so that's like an absolute negative. Again, why will I use technology? So I think there's something around communication. I think it's definitely sharing case studies and great examples of research about what does work. But I think sadly, there are still people who are feeling very resistant for, I think, very good reasons in their minds.
And this is it. We're not disrespecting those people because they've had bad experiences. Where it could be, as you say, fraud. It could be. I mean, we all hate those telephone lines where we're on for 2 hours because there are some things you just have to talk through. Doesn't that's definitely not an age thing, is it? Caroline, what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's about finding the right things for the right people. I think, and working with. I think it's definitely working with existing groups where there's trusted people already, because I think if those people, and like we've talked about a lot of peer support, if those people are saying this is okay, this has been really useful for me, then that's going to be a much easier way in, and people will feel then less pressured and not forced into anything. I think there's I suppose for lots of us, there's all this stuff that may be possible in the future that we just don't know about, because unless you're actually involved in developing it, then you don't know about it. And so I think just, talking about something, but talking about it, what the results will be, what the benefits will be, as opposed to we've got this piece of equipment and it'll be really good because your doctor will be able to do this or your bank will be able to do that.
Oh, you've led us into a really great point that Dan had about the future. But Dan and I, before this call, were talking about things like VR and how technology and touch screens, how technology could make a lot of the challenges we have right now. We talked about dexterity. Is a really good point on the Zoom chat about dexterity. If we have the augmented reality, we have voice activated, we have touch screens. And when we come back to Lisa, obviously, at least at the beginning, looking at how technology might address some of these challenges and resistances. What are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
I think it's a need to involve with old people way before beginning as regard to identify their needs, want and desire, and people work together in terms of people, including scientists, social scientists, stakeholder, service provider, and technology company, as well as local authority, public health, and the NHS. So based on that, start from beginning and continuate, engage with technology design and the learning, as well as a trial in terms of using it. But also, I think one of the resilience or people are afraid of using technology is what happens when something goes wrong. And that is a particular concern in care home, because the care home have a group of old people. So when the technology goes wrong, the care home can't function. And IT guy is normally not able, not approachable in the time of people needed. Same as older people in their own home, especially many of them living alone. When things go wrong, there is nowhere to find the help.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the free Wi-Fi, but that still doesn't take away some of the technology poverties we talked about earlier. And I mean, that's obviously also multi-generational. There's a really good point that just came up, I think relates into Relitza's project of make fun. A lot of people got into tech because they're Facebook, an old generation keeping in touch with your grandchildren. Relitza, when you were talking to your subjects, was it good to go in from a fun perspective rather than start with banking?
No.
Unless you're a guy, apparently, because obviously the gender side of it, the guys just want to do banking.
Yeah, they were very single-minded about it. So yeah, drivers for the male participants were getting things done. For the female participants, there was more about they were willing to spend the time to get to understand better what they can do, and they were more entertainment focused as well. So for example, we found that was it 76% of the women who were involved in the pilot were responsible for all the communication. So they were about getting in touch. And an interesting point that was made about the relationship roles for couples, where one person takes on the, let's say, responsibility for online shopping, for banking, for doing boring stuff, and the other does communication. We actually did have a few couples in the pilot. And the interesting thing is that they participated in separate groups. So they didn't go to the same training groups, and they one of them was doing banking, the other one wasn't doing banking. But I think the gendered approach is one of the most divisive points, but it's also a very interesting understanding, gives us an opportunity to think through how we can provide support and how we actually target learning. What activities do we do with learning? So I'll give you an example. Orbit, the housing association, has decided to structure learning initially in terms of teaching people how to fill in forms. That failed quite quickly. So apparently filling in forms is nobody's idea of fun. But things like online tours of museums worked really well, because it didn't require filling in any forms and it was quite enjoyable.
Well, I work, one of my other hats is I work with an organisation that works in the gardening space. And of course, all the RHS shows have had to go virtual this year. So where people would go to Hampton Court or to Chelsea, this is people of the sort of the RHS generation, they've suddenly gone to virtual shows. So again, they wanted to go and have virtual garden tours and buy their beautiful roses, whatever it may be. COVID in a way has forced people in a hopefully positive way to engage with technology. And we've had lots of conversations in the chat about virtual funerals and around religious meetups. And there's a good question actually about the gender side, is whether this is totally from the era and maybe it just represents what they do face to face, their roles within the relationship. So maybe this is a more fascinating kind of discussion around sort of gender roles, isn't it? And how sort of the young, my dad uses my mum's Facebook account, is on there more than she is. But this is it, technology and embracing that is, maybe it's just a traditional roles going back. But I say, I just love that the Japanese lady who's got coding at the age of 81. From what would, a kind of a final question to all the panel, and we'll go through in order, is what are you most excited about from a technology perspective going forward that could empower the older generations to have a better experience with online? And we'll work through. So we'll start with Lisa. Just a very sort of quick thought on what you can see coming forward that might help the challenges you're seeing.
In terms of user friendly, it's already happened that older people are accessing internet to go on the archives and to go on the internet for those access to the community resources without worry and being restricted by their mobility. As regard to many old people, they have a mobility restriction that they can't go too far, for example. Technology also, and I really hope technology can free up the care staff to do something which is not directly related to care. So it can free up their time to will use their time in terms of the human contact and human relationship in the care side. And that is the most meaningful care quality for old people.
Emily, your thoughts?
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to exploring the older people that said that they want to use their tablet or device that they have, and those who want to explore technology in more detail, the outcome of that. So what they want to use it for, what's meaningful for them, and then the learning from that, enabling us to perhaps then share those positive messages across all of our scheme member base and in the wider community, and hopefully to encourage more social contact with our befrienders, because the telephone at the moment is the most vital tool, but actually people are really missing that face-to-face. You can't obviously take away from the face-to-face contact and the touch, but I think seeing a friendly face, as we all know, it does make a difference. So I'm really looking forward to that learning and hopefully encouraging people to really sort of make steps towards perhaps learning more about IT and the positives.
Exactly. No, thank you. Caroline.
I think they're growing in confidence, and I think that working with the people that we're working with now who are using Zoom, and they've got that, and they're becoming more confident. And so once that confidence is there, they're more willing to look at other things, and then those will be the people who encourage other people to do that.
Pal, your thoughts?
I think for me is that there's huge amount of work in progress in terms of security, because vulnerability and being able to feel confident and safe when you're interacting with the technology world there's a huge amount of work being done in that space. And I think once that's been perhaps publicized and communicated in a simple way so that people can really understand, so how does that kind of impact me and my actions, then things would, I think people will embrace. My example was my mother, like I said, doesn't speak a word of English, doesn't read, write. All her life, she's been using a thumb to declare her identity. Now she can use that to engage with her mobile device to talk to her family members.
Security is a good point, though, and that has been also mentioned in the group chat around passwords. There's just another layer of complexity with passwords, but also that real concern about security, about the concern about the internet being the Wild West. When my mum first went online, I gave her the URLs, you know, the www.marksandspencers.com and, you know, John Lewis and all the sort of the safe places. But as we've also talked about, people need that signpost at the beginning about where is safe online. My father-in-law decided to download a map when got a virus on his computer. It's so easy to do. It's like, why didn't you just go to the RAC or the AA? So I just Googled it and I found this. And they said, press here. So I did. And even somebody who you think's relatively savvy, I mean, and again, that's not generational. We've all done that. We've all clicked on the link we shouldn't have done. But that one experience, maybe for a less confident older user, could be the end of that relationship. You know, it went wrong, therefore not doing that again. You know, nothing happened, but it still is also quite concerning, isn't it? Melissa.
Thanks. As a researcher, I will plead that there is more funding available for people like myself to interact with people over the age of 55 or 65 to do interesting research, but also to do more practically oriented stuff around innovation. I would say that this could, in a slightly longer term, could really open up discussions that we're having at multiple levels, you know, not only national level policymakers, but also more regional level and more community-based level. So I want to be able to quite easily access funding and to have more access to people over the age of 65 with whom to work on research and innovation. And I think it's not the most important thing, but from my perspective, it's going to be great.
I like the ambassadors, though. As you say, you're working with people in that generation, and we've all talked about ambassadors, people of that age who it's really empowered them and they really love what they're doing. Getting those ambassadors to work, to shout to all of their peers about, you know, it's not scary. You've got to, you know, it's great. It's allowed me to speak to my grandchildren or whatever it may be, or learn a new hobby, you know, all the things you can do. And right now we've all been having international conversations, haven't we? It doesn't matter where people are. It's brilliant. Debbie, what are your thoughts?
So I have such a long wish list, but we don't have to go through it. So I'd say one wish is to have people involved in developing solutions and not to assume that technology is the starting point. It's not. The starting point is, what do we need? I saw, you know, in the chat there a number of things about what do people really want, and there's so much, there's so many kind of non-tech solutions as well. It's just part of a toolkit that we have, and we need to use it wisely.
And it should be blended, as you say, as Lisa rightly said, it isn't a black and white. It's like we don't have to talk to anybody. And I think that's why people, as you were saying, are so upset with GPs. It's like, well, actually, some things I do need to come and talk to you about. You know, the repeat prescription, maybe not, but it and like the banks, they just pushed us away. And I think that's why Metro Bank's done quite well, because they've been opening branches. There are some conversations we want to have with somebody.
Yeah. If you want a tech to look out for, I'm going to have to say augmented reality, because the technology is actually progressing in a very good way, in that it's becoming much more usable, but also wearable. And it has the ability to address problems such as being able to manipulate objects without the need for any strength, for example.
Yep.
You can just turn things, you can use your head movement, you can use voice with it. So I think augmented reality is, as opposed to virtual reality, is a tool that actually could be very helpful in the long term.
A more blended solution. I mean, I've loved technology, some of the simple things where there were robot pets in Japan, which Dan did say sounded terrifying, but there were seals, weren't they? And it's basically for older people who'd like to have a pet but maybe weren't able to look after them. These purred and you could cuddle them and they were warm, and it gave somebody a sense of purpose and a sense of relationship without the concern if someone was suffering from dementia or forgetting to feed them or whatever it may be, or vets bills, of course. There's lots of other reasons, but there's so many nuances to how tech can help people to enjoy every period of their lives, because a lot of what we've talked about today isn't generational. A lot of the stuff we've actually spoken about, everybody's feeling, especially during the COVID. I mean, a lot of conversations about how we've all been feeling over the last 6 months and how technology has been a help and a hindrance, but it still comes back to people, doesn't it? Thank you so much for all the group chat we've had. We've had so much engagement this morning, and thank you so much to our panel. There's lots of people getting in contact with each other on the chat. And are there any last questions? We've talked a lot about, phones and laptops. Tech is a massive topic, and a lot of little subtle bits, but I agree it should be user driven, and we need to make sure those users don't feel that they're grouped into one bundle and that they all have individual requirements, needs. We've talked a lot about loneliness, we've talked about resentment, and I think we're wrapping up with connection as well. What's the point of having all this connectivity if we can't actually get access to it? But thank you all very much for your time. I'm now going to attempt to share my screen. We'll be in touch with the participants to share the material. And let me see if I can share this screen and leave you with a rather lovely video. Yeah. And thanks. And it's a little bit of fun to end with this. And I think Dan said, which I couldn't hear over the noise there, that the ESRC is interested in hearing your views, and we're going to be sending out an evaluation. And if you're interested in connecting with any of today's speakers or want to know anything more about the research, then please email collaborate@sussex.ac.uk. But thank you all so much for joining us. That zoomed by. That was a fantastic conversation. So thank you so much to our panel. Have a lovely rest of your day.